Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome back to the Blacknight Podcast. I'm your host, Michele, the CEO and founder of Blacknight. I'm taking over the role of hosting this because Con has moved on to new pastures, and hope he's getting along well there. So it's been a while since we've done any podcasts, so we thought we'd pick it up again. But we're changing things around a little. I'll be hosting to some of this, and other times I'll be joined by my sidekick, Jonathan, who hails from all the way across the Atlantic in the US of A. He's our token American. Jonathan, say hello.
Hello, here's your token American reporting in.
So how are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I am not enjoying the weather, that is for sure.
It is cold here.
It's bucketing down here at the moment. I don't know why, but the weather has just gone nasty. I think we're now dealing with 2 or 3 weather warnings again, which is a bit crazy considering it's March. So, rather than talk about the weather, which all Irish people love doing, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening in the wonderful world of Blacknight. So, first up, we're hiring.
Yay! More coworkers.
Yeah, but you don't get to see them, Jonathan. You're not even in the office.
Just for once a year at Christmas.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, we can let you over other times as well. You never know. We might expand that. We might let you have like 2 outings a year.
I'm ready and waiting.
So yeah, we're hiring again. We're expanding our customer service team. Looking for people to join us in our Carlow headquarters. The job ad is up on blacknight.careers, or you can go over to our blog where there's a bit of information about it. Not sure what else I can really say about that. I mean,
it's a technical support role, and it's a challenge. You get to learn all the techie things that make the web run, and we train you, and you gain skills to succeed in Ireland's digital economy.
Yeah, that sums it up. That sums it up better than I could do it. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Pretty good. Yeah, I know. Look, I mean, the thing is, I mean, the reality is, we always look for, we're always on the lookout for new staff to join those teams, and you don't need to have like super duper complex qualifications. It's more down to having practical experience and an interest in learning. So if you're comfortable mucking around with PCs, if you've taken a PC apart and managed to put it back together and it still works, preferably. Taking it apart is easy, by the way. You can just use a sledgehammer. Then maybe you should be looking at something like that. I mean, it's the kind of thing where you need to have a certain amount of technical skill. You also need to be good with people, I think, because a lot of the time you're talking to our clients from across Ireland, Europe, and further afield. And if you don't like dealing with other human beings, then you probably don't want to be in that job, because you're talking to people who can be from all over the place, and you're not interacting with them in person, but you are on the phone, on email, on live chats, and everything else with them pretty much all day. It's kind of full contact sport, I suppose.
It's the best kind, right?
Hey, look, I mean, it's a role that I think it's important for us. I mean, from our perspective, what's the difference between us and the competition? I mean, it's all going to be down to that customer experience. So from our side, our customer service team need to be the best we can get. They need to be good. They need to be responsive, and it's not a role I think that everybody's going to love. But I think it's a role that some people will.
Yeah, and I can say, in addition to working for Blacknight, I'm also a Blacknight customer for my own businesses. And whenever I've had an issue with my server, they're always very helpful and they know how to fix it. So when I break things, they fix it.
Yeah. So what else is going on? Okay, so Ireland, most of the restrictions around COVID and the pandemic have been lifted. At this stage now, I think the only restrictions left really would be around on public transport and in a medical setting. Everywhere else, the mask mandates are gone, social distancing is gone, all those stickers on the floor in shops, floors in shops are gone. So I think a lot of people have come back into their offices, kind of returned to normal. On our side, we're seeing more staff coming back into the office, which is interesting. For some people, I think they hadn't been in there in probably 2 years.
Right. Yeah, I know when I was there in December, it was still pretty empty, and that was the first time I'd been in an office in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've been trying to encourage people to come back into the office a little bit more, but I think things are kind of stabilizing now. It's no longer a case of something, that constant moving target where you wouldn't know what the government was going to come out with the next week. So yeah, I think that it's a move back towards the office more, but I don't think we're ever going to be back in a situation where every single employee is working in an office, be it for ourselves or for anybody else, 5 days a week. I just don't see that kind of situation being the norm ever again.
And that's nice because, while working from home is great and convenient, it's also nice to go into an office occasionally and interact with humans. And, it's just it's kind of like a treat almost.
Yeah, unfortunately you broke up on me, but I kind of worked out what you were saying. You're talking about how being in the office can be a bit of a treat, a break.
Yeah, and especially if you've got young children and working from home might not be the most ideal scenario for a lot of people, but sometimes it does work, and it's nice that flexibility is becoming the default, whereas before it was very rigid. I know even here in the US, where employers are notably inhumane when it comes to things like this, they're being very, very accommodating and flexible.
Yeah, look, I think I think we all have to kind of look at work in a kind of more balanced way, I suppose. I mean, the over the course of the last couple of years, that work life balance, that difference between work and life, I think almost disappeared for a lot of people because
Yeah.
the lines became so blurred for many people. Now, hey, we're lucky enough to work in a sector which allowed us to do that. I mean,
Right.
if you're working in a shop, you're working in a shop. That didn't change. You couldn't exactly do that remotely from home. So we have been quite fortunate.
Well, what's funny is, for the before I worked for Blacknight, I worked from home for 10 years and it was completely normal to me. So when the lockdowns happened and everything shut down, I was like, "Welcome to the fun, everybody, of working from home."
Yeah. So let's see what else. Let's actually have a. I'm going to pull up the blog there as well. So I mean, a lot of the time, what we tend to do is like we talk about stuff that's going on Blacknight.blog. We try to push out information that's of use to customers and partners, and
Yeah, the big thing this week or last week now, because God, time is a compressed circle, is that CentOS is basically going away, not just with us, but with in the wider world. It's being replaced with Alma Linux because of licensing issues with Red Hat and all that. So if you use CentOS on your dedicated or virtual servers, you're going to have to change that, and we're not going to sell CentOS anymore.
yeah, I mean the thing, but the thing with open source software is, this happens from time to time. Like I remember probably 10 or so years back, a load of us were looking at Red Hat Enterprise derivative. This was before CentOS even became really a thing. And at the time, I think there were probably a half dozen fledgling projects. And, a load of people were like, oh, this one looks good, and this one looks good. And, they tried things out, and then you discover 2-3 months further down, or maybe a bit further down the line, that it wasn't going to be the one. It wasn't going to be the one that was going to get that community back. You need something that has that community around it, because otherwise, you're not going to get your patches, you're not going to get the updates, you're not going to get the new features. It needs to have a good, strong support base. So the Alma Linux is being looked after by or backed to a certain degree by the people who are all involved with Cloud Linux.
Right.
So that means that it's got some level of stability.
Right, and it's basically a fork of the last version of CentOS, correct?
I'm not sure whether it's forked from CentOS to CentOS or forked from Red Hat Enterprise. But it's, the thing is, it's one of those things. It's all kind of in that realm. I mean, you've got your, you've got you've got your CentOS, you've got your Debian, you've got a couple of other distros that are popular, and the CentOS is no longer going to be an option. Alma is probably the one that a lot of people are going to end up using. It's the one we're going to be offering from now on, and we're going to start moving deployments onto that. And it's fine. I mean, ultimately, look, you're running stuff and things on a Linux-based server. If you want a Red Hat derivative, you'll end up on Alma. I mean, that's basically where it's going. Yeah, so I mean, CentOS is going to be end of life. I'm actually just trying to confirm the actual dates for you, because it's one of those things that we just need to be clear about. So CentOS Linux 8 is end of life as of December 31st, 2020. So it's actually end of life already.
Okay.
CentOS is going end of life. It's not going to be supported any further. We were looking for alternatives, as were a lot of other people. The team behind Cloud Linux are backing Alma Linux, so that's the option that we're going with. So so we'll be offering that to people on dedicated servers, and we'll be also switching some of our own stuff over to us in the coming months. And it's news, but it's not really that kind of amazing or anything, because realistically, if you're using CentOS, you should probably look at doing a refresh and switching over. And you can do things like where you can either, if you're refreshing your hardware at some point, then that would be the ideal time to make that change. But there are also options for doing what they'd call like a side grade, which would be that you'd move from CentOS to Alma Linux, which will probably work fairly well in many scenarios, but it's not the kind of thing that I would recommend somebody who isn't comfortable with running Linux servers to try out and just kind of experiment with. So, Jonathan, don't try this, please. I really don't want to have to deal with the tears.
My websites are broken. Fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's the kind of thing where, if you decide at 10 o'clock at night, your time, in your time zone, to go playing around with this, you'd be waking up one of my poor staff in the middle of the night to try and fix your server for you, and nobody's going to be happy about this. It's just going to be very unhappy.
That happened once. My backup function went out of control and ate the hard drive space, and it sent alarms and alerts that woke up the on-call technician, and he was not exactly pleased, but he fixed it.
Yeah, well, there is always that problem where that because you're staff, they're kind of like they just kind of go, oh, staff person's having a problem. Ugh. You'll get it. So you get this kind of, you get the best and the worst of them, in that you'll get really good support for certain things, but they'll be incredibly grudging about giving it to you, and they'll complain about it all the time, because they can complain to you that they can't complain to our normal clients, because that would be inappropriate. Anyway, never mind.
You want to move on to WHMCS?
Yeah, so this is something that we're still working away on this, and this is one of those things where I kind of think, look, I think it's important that we let people know that we are working on this new platform, but we ran into some technical issues and difficulties. So originally, the two of us talked about this going back to, when was it? Like September, October of last year, and we put out a blog post, and then people were contacting us, and we ended up where the deadline, all the deadlines slipped, and they've slipped a couple of times since then. But now I think we're very, very, very close to being able to turn it on, to be able to start offering that to people. I mean, it's a big change for us. I mean, we've been using the Odin Ingram Micro platform for 14, 15 years now.
Wow, that's ancient computer terms.
Well, yeah, I mean it was updated and upgraded across that time. It's not like that. What you log into today is exactly the same as what you logged in
Right.
15 or 15 years ago. No.
And it works, and it works great. You know.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not. There's no point getting into an entire kind of what's wrong with the current setup. That's not particularly helpful. But the new system, when it's put live, the user experience should be a lot better, and we're going to have teething problems. There's going to be issues. There's going to be problems, but I think compared to it's compared to a situation where we would end up having to kind of say, well, we can't fix this anytime soon. It's a kind of case. It should be a case of, okay, you found a problem. Let's see how quickly we can fix that, and because we will have a greater ability, I think, to fix some of these kind of user experience type issues. We've been testing a lot of different scenarios. I mean, you've got an account on it, I've got an account on it, and it's easier to do things.
Yeah, I've spent considerable amount of time breaking it, as I like to say, and it is a great new experience. There's new customers will probably have a lot easier time when they log in for the first time figuring out what to do, because it just kind of handholds you through the whole process. And it's got a pretty interface, it's got nice colors, and it's nice. I like it. The thing I'm really excited about, though, is the new Titan email. That's that sexy new email is something.
Yeah, I mean, the email. I think I was talking to somebody earlier today about the average small business. I mean, whatever the hell the average small business is, and I think the reality is we've been doing this for about 20 odd years now. Like, we've been providing hosting and domain services to companies of all shapes and sizes. For the vast majority of them, email is the thing that they care the most about in the whole wide world. If their website goes offline for half an hour or whatever, something happens, something breaks. I mean, sure, they don't like it, but they're not going to be bawling their eyes out. Whereas if their email is a little bit slow, or there's any kind of issues with it, it's a major headache for them. So, okay, the Titan email is a massive upgrade on the email service that we've been providing for the last few years. Now, the key difference is that, like with Microsoft 365, it's not hosted on our servers. It's on somebody else's servers. It's on somebody else's infrastructure. So there's going to be a few little things where we won't have access to some things that we did have, but by comparison, like, you'll have like this so much better experience. I mean, it's a really, really nice way of managing email. You've got a nice little mobile app that works well. I haven't tried the Android ones. I'm on iPhone here, but the iOS app is very, very functional. It's not just like a way of just sending and receiving email. You can do a bit more than that in the app.
Yeah. It's a whole experience, which is nice. It's all integrated.
Yeah, and it's part of a kind of it's part of a kind of thing within that this Titan experience that I think should be. It should just be. It's better. I mean, it's more modern. It's what people want. And yeah, there's no point getting into that. I think what we need to say is it's cool. You love it.
Yeah, I'm an email nerd. I like getting email, and I'm trying to find excuses to use my new Titan email account just because I like being in it. So, but that's me. I'm a nerd. So
okay, I think we need to stage an intervention. I need to have words with your wife. Your wife and I will have a little chat about this, and we'll see what we can do to fix you, because that is just not normal. I am amused that you're using a Blacknight mug, whereas I've got my Batman one here.
Yeah, I have every email I've ever sent since I started emailing. back to my Prodigy and Earthlink days.
Okay, you really do need help. I have I have had and lost access to email accounts so many times over the past 27 or 28 years that, yeah, I mean, I have absolutely I have no access to the first half dozen or so email accounts that I had. They're completely gone.
Yeah, some of the emails can't be opened, but they're there. I know they're there.
Yeah, one of the problems I've been trying to deal with is getting back access for family members who had stuff in some of these free email accounts from years back, and the recovery email address and the recovery telephone number and all that is defunct. The person moved countries, that the company went out of business. It becomes really, really hard to regain access if all of those things are just wrong. Well. Anyway, moving.
So, do you want to talk about the internet issues raised by the Ukraine and Russia issue?
Well, sure, but I think you're going to have to ask me about it.
So, okay, what various issues are cropping up on the interwebs to do with this war that are sort of unexpected or showing that people don't really understand how the internet works, and also perhaps that Russia doesn't understand how the internet works? You've got various social media networks where they're still they in theory could operate in Russia, but now they've been blocked. Or you've got, networks voluntarily leaving the Russian market. Then you have them bolstering their presence in Ukraine. And so it feels like almost like the internet is a new front in whatever is going on. And there's a lot of disagreement and argument over, like, should Russia be disconnected from the internet? Should we ban their domain extension? And what is the appropriate action to take when in this new world where a country feels like it can invade another one, and how can they expect to be treated on the internet as equals when they're an aggressive force?
Well, it's. So this is one of these kind of situations where there's so many factors at play, and they're all it's a kind of a perfect storm, I suppose, in many respects. Like, if you think back, it's probably the first major conflict in a social media world in many respects.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I mean, that's actually probably not entirely true. I think Syria is another one, but I think it's one where, like, Russia has been involved with or accused of being involved with a very large part of some of the cyber attacks and misinformation and disinformation in more than one country over the last few years. And Russia is a major world power. They're not some kind of secondary or tertiary power. They're a major power. And part of any war is always going to be propaganda. But propaganda these days is real time. It's not a quick case of something happened somewhere yesterday or 2 or 3 days ago, and we have to wait 48, 72 hours for it to appear on the front pages of our newspapers. Like, citizen journalists are able to push out content in real time or close to real time.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I mean, how you've got, the social networks deciding that they can't operate because Russia's introducing new laws restricting what they do and how they do it, and then some other companies deciding that they can't operate there for a variety of other reasons. And it's really, really weird. I mean, how quickly it all happened. So you went from, there's a potential problem between Russia and Ukraine, but nothing's going to happen, to, oh my God, Russia has invaded Ukraine. That happened very, very quickly. Now, I suppose for those of us who are kind of interested in current affairs but not like spending our entire days looking at the geopolitics of the world, we probably weren't expecting. I suspect others would kind of look at it and kind of go, hey, we saw this coming from, miles off. But on the internet side of things, I mean, let's not get bogged up in the politics of it. On the internet side of things, it's interesting because Russia and China are part of the global internet. I mean, they have their own country code top level domains. So you've got .ru, .cn for China. They actively engage with ICANN, RIPE, IETF, IGF, all those acronym soups that I spend time hanging out with. So, they're involved in those conversations about internet policy globally, but they've always been a little bit of an outlier. You've always had this kind of thing where it was like, well, they're engaging, but are they really engaging with the same rules as the rest of us? And it was never 100% clear. And then at least one person, or plus, I think several people within the Ukrainian government wrote to both ICANN and RIPE. So ICANN's the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, so they look after domain names globally. And RIPE is the organization that looks after IP addresses in Europe and parts of Africa. And the Ukrainians wrote to these organizations going, hey, Russia's doing nasty stuff. You should disconnect them from the broader internet. So it was a very, very extreme ask, I think. And that's been repeated this week during the ICANN meeting that's being held virtually, where a representative from the Ukrainian government has asked, ICANN and others to do things. And I don't know, it's one of those things where you can't just kind of say, no, this is the wrong thing. I mean, you can, but you can't just say that what they're asking for is completely inappropriate. They shouldn't ask for it. They should know better. You need to be a little bit more nuanced about it. I mean, you have to understand where they're coming from, even though the answer is this is the wrong thing to do.
Right, and they have to be very careful about what kind of precedent they set. And we don't want the internet to fracture and have separate internets for separate countries where the rules are different. We want the global internet to work the way it does, which is open somewhat and cooperative. And if we just willy-nilly decide to kick somebody out of the DNS root, well, that's a power that nobody should really wield. And then unless it's an extreme circumstance, and I'm not sure. Again, you could probably speak to this more than me. I'm not sure this is an extreme enough circumstance to warrant that kind of action.
Well, but here's the fun thing, and this is the bit that a lot of people seem to have misunderstood: is the ask itself was ridiculous because it assumes that only .ru domain names are used by Russians.
Right.
Whereas that's not the case at all. I mean, RT Russia Today, which the EU has sanctioned. The EU sanctioned RT and Sputnik last week. And it's RT.com. It's not RT.ru, it's RT.com.
Right.
Sputnik, I think it might be a .com as well. But the idea that, if there is no easy way, there's no kind of off switch. The internet doesn't have an off switch. Within a country, a government could turn around to every ISP and say, turn it off, pull the plug. But it's the way the internet has always worked is by having that decentralization.
Right.
And even when it comes to blocking websites or blocking access to services, the Russian government, I think, decided to block Facebook the other day. And it's clear from what I'm seeing that block has been far from perfect, because I've seen Russians popping up on Facebook. They're not in as large a number as previously.
Well, and that kind of goes into one thing that we want to talk about is there are ways around these arbitrary blocks using VPNs or using the Tor. It's changing and making more aware of the tools people can use to circumvent this kind of top-down censorship.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing about it is, I mean, if you're tech savvy, a lot of those blocks aren't going to impact you. You're going to find a way to get around them. Be that using Tor, using VPNs, using, I mean, in some cases, it's as simple as changing your DNS server. If you
Right.
if the resolver that you're using is blocking certain things, then you can switch to another resolver. Now, that's not going to always work because sometimes the ISP will kind of force you to use a particular one, which can happen. And it's the same with VPNs in that VPN. China is the country where I think a lot of people would have experience that you if you're traveling in China, you're going to find that you have patchy connectivity to a lot of Western services. That it's not that some of them will be blocked outright, but others will be blocked some of the time, not all the time, and you can't be sure that it's not being observed. I mean, it's the thing I suppose really though is it's what you can circumvent some of that, but the bigger issue is it appropriate for a government to block access to certain content? And I think I can argue it both ways. I mean, you're okay. Like in your case, you're a parent. Would you want your children to have access to every single website on the internet without your supervision?
Absolutely not. I actually run a DNS level blocker on my home network to block stuff we don't want them to see, which irritatingly prevents the parents from seeing a lot of anodyne stuff. But it's just enforcing a safe level for them. But until they're old enough to make decisions for themselves, which they're not now.
And then I think this is part of the problem is that there's always this kind of interesting debate, like where do you draw the line? So, like, take as an ISP, as a provider, should I allow access to everything from my network to other networks, or should I put in controls so that you are protected from harm? Now, I use the word harm intentionally. I'm not saying what kind of harm, but let's say we break it down a bit further. So you're saying, okay, harm, yeah, okay. I don't, that's okay. I can see why you want to do that, and there's arguments why that you should be doing that. You should be protecting your users from harm. But then what is harm? Are we talking about malware? We're talking about viruses? Are we talking about child abuse material? Are we talking about communist websites or anti-vax blogs? Are we talking about what are we talking about? What is the harm?
Yeah, where do you draw the line that and as they say, it's the thin end of the wedge. Where do you draw the line and then where do you stop?
Yeah, I mean this is part of the thing. Like, I mean, the EU issued sanctions against RT and Sputnik. What basis? Well, because basically those services that exist across multiple media exist primarily as it's state-sponsored propaganda. I mean, you can call it misinformation or disinformation if you wish, but I mean, I think using kind of older words, as it were, I think disinformation and misinformation are thrown around a lot these days as a kind of a catch-all for information that you don't like in some respects. But I think if you look at it in terms of it's propaganda, so it's Russian propaganda. It's the Russian version of it's the Russia state's view of the world. So I can understand why they would wish to block that. Now, should they have blocked it? That's another question entirely.
Right.
And I can argue it both ways, to be honest with you. I could look at it and say, well, yeah, because people are stupid. We are collectively dumb. We'll believe things that we see, that we read, that we hear. But if I follow that through logically, if they're blocking RT, why aren't they blocking Fox News?
Right, because then you have to sort of get into this into the weeds and philosophical about what is misinformation. Is it misinformation if it's capitalists misinforming you, or is it misinformation if a government is misinforming you? Where's the line? Yeah.
You know,
It's
I
complicated.
I don't have the answer. I mean, I genuinely
Yeah.
don't have the answer. I can like from my okay. So moving away from the philosophy, looking at it from a practical perspective, as an Irish business, we're an Irish company. We're based in Ireland. We're subject to Irish law. So, if the EU it says, you have to block access to these particular things, you can say, well, okay, I don't agree with that, but I don't agree. Just because you don't agree with the speed limit doesn't mean you get to drive faster.
Right.
You don't like it's that's the kind of thing that you can get a trade association or a lobbyist to deal with for you, or you can talk to your local TD maybe, but you
And
can't change the law by ignoring it.
And let's face it, if you really want to read RT and Sputnik, you can figure out how.
Oh yeah, of course.
You don't need the EU to give you permission to do it. You can find it yourself.
Oh, totally. I mean, there's a load of services out there that do things like proxying one website through another, so that you can access things. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, the since GDPR, a load of US websites are not accessible in Europe anymore. There's ways to get to them. You can fire up a VPN and pretend to be in the US. I can do this, and I've done that in the past. I mean, I've done that in order to see what price I can get on certain products. If I access it from a US IP, it's one price. If I access it from an Irish IP, it's another. But it's one of those things that I don't know. I think the way I look at it is that technology in general should be neutral. Like, networks should be neutral. The internet should be neutral. You shouldn't be weaponizing the infrastructure. If you want to block, like you've done in your home, you said, right, you're not going to allow Pornhub into the house. You're entitled to do that. But you shouldn't have a situation where nobody can have Pornhub in their house.
Exactly. But what do you do when someone like Russia is weaponizing the internet? I mean, what is the consequence of that? What should be the consequence?
Well, this is one of those kind of questions again that you're like, well, I can think of things that I would like to see, but how do you balance it? I mean, I think that's the problem with a lot of these things, is that in many cases, we don't have scalpels, we have hammers. Like, we see. I mean, there's a lot of these kind of hilarious expressions of, if you've got a hammer, all you see is nails. Everything looks like a nail, and it's very easy to take the high ground and say, philosophically, I'm opposed to that. I think a lot of it is just kind of educating people in general. I mean, making people aware of that, that the internet isn't inherently bad, that is good. And if you look at, there's been so many positive things. I mean, how people have come together and, done things together that have been positive. But I don't know. I mean, state-sponsored hacking, state-sponsored propaganda, DDoS attacks, all of those kind of things. I don't know. I think we probably need to be better at defending as well, I suppose. I mean, you're American. Yay, good for you. You're not a neutral country.
No, we're not, and we will take a side, and we will back up that side, with force if necessary. And not only that, what we decide to do, a lot of the rest of the world will follow, and so it's with great power comes great responsibility. How do we go about it in a responsible way that doesn't violate our principles that that we hold dear? We want free speech and free religion and all those things. How we don't want to become the enemy to fight the enemy, and if we say cut them off the internet, well, that makes us the bad guy. That kind of takes away Sheen from being the force of good we like to believe we are. let's not get into the weeds with that.
No. But I mean, it's the thing is like here in Ireland, over the last couple of weeks, the position Ireland's position as a neutral nation is something that's come up in multiple fora. It's very, very clear that we are not as neutral as some people would like to believe that we are. And I think there's a definite feeling as well that we probably shouldn't be. But that doesn't mean either that flavor of neutrality means that we're no longer neutral at all, that we're suddenly going to start invading countries left, right, and center.
Right. It's a fine line. You don't just because you want to take a stand against a bully doesn't mean you have to take a stand with your army. You can take a stand economically or with sanctions and with just your actions, and also supporting others who may be taking more direct action.
Yeah, and the problem is that we're having here is that how do you draw that line? So where on the spectrum do you go from being supportive of other countries that are taking action versus stepping over the line and actually taking action? So let's say Irish citizens and residents have gone to fight in Ukraine. The Irish army hasn't. Also perfectly fine. We are sending money, we're sending financial support to Ukraine, but it's humanitarian. We're not going to be sending money to support the Ukrainian army. Now, I think I'm quite comfortable with that. That makes sense to me. As you say, I think standing up to a bully and backing those countries that are standing up to a bully makes perfect sense. But I'm not sure where the line is. Where.
Well, and there's an element of realpolitik to it as well. I don't know how much we want to get into foreign affairs here, but stopping Russia and Ukraine now is better than stopping them when they're at Calais or they're at they're outside Irish ports. It's sort of a self-preservation as well, that your neutrality will only protect you until there's gunboats in your harbors.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. I mean, it's just I just think it's something that Ireland has played lip service to the concept of being a neutral country for the better part of a century. But it's very rarely that we have any real debate or discussion as a country about what the hell that means and whether it is the appropriate position for us to take. Like, we're a small country. Like, if we were to drop our supposed neutral stance and start getting involved more actively in various different things, it's not that it would make a huge difference to anybody realistically, because we're too small.
Yeah, probably the Brits would be the ones who only would really care because it would affect them directly.
Potentially, I don't know, but it's one of these things where we're getting this kind of there's good people on both sides kind of argument from some people. And I'm seeing it from the extreme right, and I'm seeing it from the extreme left. And it feeds back into, some of this is more political than it would be technical or anything else. But I think it has an impact because it's also, a lot of these conversations are also impacting conversations around online moderation and, content controls and what constitutes the correct usage of the internet, etc., etc. I don't know. I think there's some big questions that we probably need to face, but not today.
But not today.
So the other thing that we did want to talk about very, very briefly. So Technology.ie has awoken.
It is reborn.
Well, it was slumbering. It's kind of woken up a little bit, and it's moving around. It's shaking itself up a little. Okay, so what we've done, and a lot of this is actually Jonathan's work because, he does things.
I know how to run publications, let's just say that.
Or so you say, so you say. So we're now pushing out some content there most days of the week with a mixture of articles that we're getting in from a third-party source, which is kind of helpful. So we're trying to focus on topics that are, technology related in some way.
It's tech and science.
Tech, science, internet, stuff that we think is kind of interesting and useful.
Yeah, and our goal is to sort of build it up as a sort of independent technology news source for Ireland. So the content we're kind of picking is things we know will sort of directly affect Ireland or would be of interest to the Irish tech crowd. Like yesterday, we put up the stuff about Apple's new phones and whatnot, things like that.
Look, Apple is always going to get people all excited and stuff. I mean, there's some, and it's kind of fascinating if you think that I was looking at some statistics from Ipsos MRBI, and they do these surveys on social media and messaging usage. Like the biggest one now is TikTok, and that wasn't even around like 3 years ago. Well, maybe 4 years ago. I don't know. If it existed 3 or 4 years ago, it just wasn't on anybody's radar really, and now it's like the place to go. Though I have no idea how you're meant to use it. Please don't tell me. I don't need to know.
I don't know either. I have it on my phone, but I haven't opened it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing as well. Like I've seen some companies starting to do some stuff on TikTok, and I don't know. It's a weird kind of format. I mean, it's not. I think it lends itself to certain types of content, and I think the likes of say Lad Bible, for example. I can see them doing well. Or some of these other ones where their entire thing is around gags and humor and.
I'm uninterested in building my audience on another platform. I'm not going down that road again. Yeah, I mean it leans on the ridiculous, and that's hard to monetize.
Yeah, I mean I don't know how you monetize. I mean, how would you monetize on TikTok? I mean, we're talking like product placement. What? I don't know. Anyway. So look, so here we are. The Blacknight Podcast. It's kind of back in a new form. I suspect that I'll get bored after a couple of weeks and just hand it over to you, Jonathan. No, I'm joking, or am I? Ha ha ha. No, I think
you'll have to give me Irish diction lessons,
so you can sound like you're Irish. No, I don't see that happening. We'll try to put out podcasts more frequently, more regularly than we have done. Though I don't think right now we should commit to anything too aggressive, because we'll probably miss that deadline completely. But let's see how we get on. If we can do a couple of podcasts a month, I'd be quite happy.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. We'll put key things we talked about in the show notes, and we'll try to get a transcript of this so for people who don't want to listen can read it. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.